right, welcome back to a new episode of Nucamp Campfire. Last week, Jack, we had a pleasure to have you and I discuss cybersecurity. Lots of questions from folks attending, and so we thought, hey, why not do it again? And you were nice enough to allow us to invite you again. Let me bring the chat. There we go.
Yeah, glad to
Uh,
be back.
yeah, thank you for being here. We have plenty of people already. All right, Lisette is here. Can't wait to hear more story. Yep, Krista is here. Um, we're not late, are we? No, I don't think we're late. All right,
I'm
and
so
so
excited they were early.
yeah, that's right. Can't wait. So if you didn't join last week, Jack, would you mind introducing yourself again? And then we'll do a quick recap of what we discussed last week and get into the cybersecurity topics.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack Seymour. I've been doing computer stuff for most of my life, doing cybersecurity and security research, early hacking, many years, freelancing, do some release management for a very popular flight sim. So, all sorts of fun stuff.
Kind of the one and only really flight sim in the world, who's been around for like 30 years, maybe something like that. I would think.
Something like that. It's pretty close.
Yeah, that's right.
So pretty
And
amazing product.
I
Lots
want to
of
say
fun to
hi
work
to
with.
Pia, who's here. Ehab, and we'll answer your questions, by the way. So Ehab, here's your question. I mean, you're saying hi on LinkedIn. We'll get to your question during this stream. And so I want to take that opportunity, sorry, to encourage everyone to ask, any question you may have for Jack or myself. Cybersecurity topics, that's what we're going to talk about. But if you have any additional topics that you would like to discuss, that's fine as well. Uh, Chances are, if you're listening to us, you're on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Just type in your question and it's going to pop up right here. Hey, Chris, tuning in from the Seattle area. Well, guess what? I'm from the Seattle area, and Jack not too far from here in Bellingham. So, Jack, last time we talked, we really were talking broadly about your experience in cybersecurity, why it was important. I did a silly demo, almost kind of giving away my identity and password online. But now we really want to get into more of your own experience in cybersecurity. And right when when we were starting this stream, you mentioned that over the last week already, there's been a ton of news. And I mean, tell me if that's kind of a regular week in cybersecurity or if that's more than usual. But what happened over the last 7 days?
So I would say it's kind of usual, but maybe the magnitude or the well-knownness of the companies affected this time is a little bit more than your average week. The magnitude of the amount of things happening is definitely constant. But this week, there's been a couple big vendors are having issues. One of the biggest ones for everybody, just general users, is Fortress Go Anywhere MFT product. Has a remote code execution that basically allows anybody to create an administrator account over the web using their product on your machine. And while it's been patched, thankfully, everybody, if they're using the Go Anywhere product, should definitely go patch this right away. This is a very serious sort of issue that comes up. Basically, it's through the default administration portal where during your first time setup, you're supposed to create an account for it and all of that. Well, the product didn't fully make that unavailable. And through URL manipulation, you are fairly easily able to basically create your own administration account on the machine. Once you have an administration account, you can log in and do whatever you want to that machine.
Wow, this is crazy. So you mentioned that earlier, and I'm just showing my screen here. What we're looking at is the description of that vulnerability Can you tell us what we're looking at exactly? Like, what is that website? What does it tell us? Um,
So yeah, this is the National Institute of Standards, NVD, or National Vulnerability Database. So the NIST, if you aren't familiar with them, they're the engineering group that's basically behind standards for all everything. They have a standard spec for pretty much anything that you could imagine that
yeah.
is, engineering related. That's just what they do. And the NVD is the National Vulnerability Database, which is a collection of all of the reported vulnerabilities, uh, how impactful they are, and other information about them. Now, the NVD is a great starting point, but there are many, many other vulnerability databases that go in depth, and there are even exploit databases that have proofs of concept and additional technical details so you can learn how it works and make remediations for such issues.
Oh wow! So you could actually they're actually showing you step by step how to reproduce the incident or the penetration.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And that's
And
actually a big part of what you do as a blue teamer in the SOC at about SOC level 2 or SOC level 3 is you actually go research these, learn how they're done, and then you make remediations or detections for them so that you can detect it incoming or make a fix so it's fixed automatically or quickly.
wow. Uh, and I want to say hi to Real Mom there. Oh, Real Moms Thrive. Hello, hello. Leonardo is here as well. Irene is here. Thanks for joining. Um, okay, so and that was not it. That was not all, right? You mentioned
Oh,
another. Let
oh
me
yeah.
actually pull the NSP X30.
Yep.
What is that one?
So NS NSPX30 is a newly identified malware that is actually highly complicated. So this is a state-sponsored. It's believed to be China aligned with the new APT or Advanced Persistent Threat Group called Blackwood.
Wow.
So it's suspected that Blackwood is at least affiliated, if not outright supported by China in one way or another.
Mhm.
It's never clear, but it's suspected, and so that's what is currently the working theory. Anyhow, what this is an adversary in the middle attack. So it's kind of like a man in the middle attack, but instead of actually owning the hardware like in a true man in the middle attack, they're basically infecting other pieces of hardware like routers or network switches and things like that, where official patches for pieces of software are being delivered through. So your computer calls the official server for a patch, it goes through the infected router goes gets the patch for you, but then adds to that patch the malware, so you get the official patch plus malware when you're actually installing the official patch. And yeah, it's bad.
That's great. And I'm reading here, and tell me if I'm right, that it could have been, oops, it could have been around since 2005.
So it's based off of a back door that was found originally in
Oh, I
2005,
see.
and they've been adding features and functionality to it. So a lot of malware and exploits have a very long history, and they evolve and adapt over time as security measures and detection measures evolve to track them. So it's kind of like a cat and mouse game. You have an exploit
Wow.
that's really good and does a bunch of good things for you, but now Windows Defender detects it. So what do? You don't throw away your entire exploit. You go in
Mhm.
there and you re-engineer your exploit just enough so Windows Defender doesn't detect it anymore,
Yeah.
and you get right back to business.
In a way, it's traditional software development life cycle, right? Like
Yeah.
being detected is now identified as a bug that needs to be fixed, and you have a new release then on the way to continue the exploitation.
Yeah,
Um,
it is really a professional world for some of these APT groups. It's
yeah.
just like any other software job, except you're on the other side of the law or you're working for some state-sponsored agency.
And so what's interesting in this one in particular, it seems really significant, but it we're not talking about credentials being stolen, accounts being hacked. It's I guess the predecessor of that happening, right? It's like the
Yeah.
infestation of an infrastructure. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how do you, like, from there, like, how do we know that something big is not going to happen, or there's not going to be another huge breach?
Oh, so there probably has been several huge breaches based off of this.
Yeah,
So this is basically the foothold stage where they're trying to get a foothold, initial access to the machine so they can then set up persistence and get into your network. So once they into the network, have a machine, a foothold on your network, then they start exploring and looking for things that are valuable to them, whether they're going to ransom your computers or they're going to steal data, or maybe they're just going to use your computer as part of a botnet because there's nothing interesting here, you're just a home user. Okay, botnet you.
yeah. So now you're part of a network without you knowing it.
Yeah,
That's gonna be hacking other computers and other
yeah.
servers. That's super interesting. So, I mean, I'm not a cybersecurity expert myself. I understand, I'll say, half of what we're talking about here, and I'm guessing the audience here is also intrigued and interested, but probably doesn't grasp all the concepts and all the things that are at play here from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so, what I love to do now is kind of bring us back to the skills gap. Like, what are the skills really that are needed nowadays uh, to become in demand in the cybersecurity space, right?
Uh, I mean, there's a lot of good skills that are really high demand right now. So network security, cloud security, threat intelligence, like we were talking about, where you're basically analyzing these threats and creating remediations or detections for them. Incident response, which is huge because bad things happen in this world, and if you're unprepared and you don't have incident response, it's going to cost you. There's also, compliance. Governments love to make laws. In fact, I think that's what they're there for, supposedly. So, you know, um, complying with those laws is very important, and that very often falls onto your cybersecurity team.
And
It's
I mean, you speaking of laws, I know of one in particular which states that any company, probably based on the size or the size of the breach, has to self-report the incident,
yeah,
right? And I think they're actually liable if they don't. So they're in trouble if they are breached, but then they're in trouble from the law if they don't communicate on that breach.
yeah. It could be an untenable situation because it's like you're in trouble if you breach, but you're in trouble if you report that you're breach, and you're in trouble if you don't report if you're breach.
Yeah.
It can be a minefield of a situation for companies to navigate these days, and that is Joe driving up even more of the security compliance, having security teams. It's like at least then you can go, hey, we checked all of the things. We dotted all of our I's, crossed all of our T's. We still got breach, but we did everything right. And that's how you get through that situation is go, yep, but we did everything that we knew was right at the time. So, we couldn't have done better.
And so when we talk about skills, Jack, it feels to me that when we are going over this particular breach here from a China sponsored actor, or when we're scouting that database, it feels to me that there's really two set of skills. One that I will call being more about planning, about inventory, about operations. How do you respond? Really, kind of creating plans, identifying weaknesses, procedures to scout, new information about breaches, which doesn't have to be that technical per se, right? It's
Yeah.
about creating an infrastructure, an operation system, and then of course you have the pure technical, in-depth analysis and how you're actually going to respond to those. Would you say that's fair? Like, if I'm someone who's thinking about getting into cybersecurity, what should I think about learning first? the technology and being super deep, or being or understanding the systems and being able to plan for and build a response document, for example?
It really depends on where you're coming from and what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Um, coming from quality assurance is actually a really great place to be moving into software security because
Oh, really?
basically, you're doing a lot of testing, you're managing a lot of test cases, you're managing a lot of documentation and throughput for various, customers within your team and outside of your team. So you're driving a lot of tools. So, coming from a QA perspective, the management side is very compatible with that, and it would be a very natural kind of step to go
Interesting.
from STE2, STE3, to running in a SOC team because you already have the management experience running the tickets, running the various tools. Yeah, you have some specific things to learn, but you already have the shuffling of all the data
Yeah.
practice. Now, if you're more technical or you're more interested in the low level stuff, by all means, there is absolutely huge demand for that because honestly, that's something that, it's harder to fill those roles because
Mhm.
they are so much more technical. So, a lot of what you're going to see is, if you're coming into security from, a cold start or just, a warm start where you've been in tech, but you haven't been any in, specific, deep part of tech. Yeah, you'll probably come in as an analyst,
Yeah.
work through tickets. And while you're doing that, you're going to be training and learning all of the deep technologies, and you might focus on a specific stack or a portion of it. Like you might, really focus on network security or cloud security on AWS, or you might focus on Azure only or whatever other cloud provider, or you might become a general cloud provider, but you might do them one after another too.
Yeah.
But it's really, this is a field where once you get your foot in the door, you're still learning, and you are going to keep learning, and you're going to keep learning because things I learned 3 5 years ago, they kind of apply today, but they apply with caveats because things have changed.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, uh, 15 years ago, SQL injections, you could take over almost any website anywhere because nobody was really taking them seriously.
Hmm.
Today, we all use ORMs when we're designing our database interactions. And so now, finding a good SQL injection is actually pretty rare because everybody that's doing security tests looks for it, and everybody who's developing seriously is already being prepared for it. So
That makes sense. So very much you can start with being an analyst, high level understanding of cybersecurity and creating plans. Or if you actually have the tech chops already and really want to go deep, you can go there as well. Krista actually has an interesting question there. Um, she's falling in love with the idea of chasing down bugs and penetration testing. Where will she start to actually be in that field?
okay, so red team, pen testing, chasing down bugs. This tends to be more on the technical side of
Yeah.
things. There is definitely some management and paperwork, especially if you're doing a full report and not just the technical portion of it. So, because again, depending on where you're working, who you're working with, it'll be broken down differently. Small teams, you have to do more per person, whereas large teams, you might have a bunch of specialists doing little parts of
Yeah.
things. So, to start, really for pen testing and just general chasing down bugs, get good at QA. Notice bugs in software as you use it everywhere you go. Then start applying it on a more technical level. Start looking for ways that you can make the software do things that it's not supposed to do. I mean, that's really the art of pen testing. Now, there is definitely a I guess there's some procedures and steps that you have to go through before you're going to start doing any sort of this work. So I want to make it really clear.
Yeah.
We have a good note on that. If you're going to pen test another person's website, you need to have permission from them first. Period. Like you will summon people to put you in handcuffs and throw you in a can if you don't get permission first on some sites. It's really
Interesting.
serious.
Yeah.
Make sure you have permission, or you are doing a pen test on a company or a site that has a public bug bounty program, and that you follow the rules of engagement. If they say don't do this, don't do this. If they say don't touch this server, don't touch that server. You will get in trouble, and it can be very, very serious.
So that's actually a great segue. You have been part of, or you have participated in bug bounty programs.
Yeah.
Um, Without divulging anything, what are the most famous programs that are out there? Like, can I actually look for one and show the audience a typical bug bounty program where an ISV is asking for people to actually penetrate?
Um, you know, um, Nvidia has a bug bounty program, I'm pretty sure. I don't have a
I'm
list
looking
off the
for it.
top of my head, but most of the big companies have bug bounty programs. Microsoft has one on at least some of their products. I'm like 99% sure. I know Amazon has several bug bounty programs for different services of theirs. I know Google has a few programs.
Let me share
Uh,
my screen here. Yeah.
Apple is like famous for giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars to people who've rooted their phones.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, finding bug bounty programs really isn't that hard, but don't just assume that they have one. Go look for
Yeah.
a bug bounty program with that company. Or if they don't have one, you could even just email them at their general support or technical support and go, "Hey, I want to do some bug bountying. Is that okay?"
Well, there
And
you go. There's
they
one
can
here,
the
right?
worst they can
Google.
say is yes or
Yeah.
no.
So this is Google, an Alphabet Vulnerability Reward Program, VRP. Um, and they talk about the amounts that you can actually get. That's in a search between $100 to $31,000 for qualifying bugs. And so, Jack, you've participated in some of them. Can you tell us about the experience of participating in one and applying? I mean, how do you do it, like from beginning to end? Do you just apply online? Do you wait for them to come back
Oh,
to you? Can you tell
well,
us?
if they have a public bug bounty program, you just go about and do it. Um,
Yeah.
you know, if they don't and you want to do a bug bounty, you can definitely just reach out to them, and they wait for them to come back, say yes or no. And this is, of course, for a website. Rules are a little bit different if you're working on software that's installed to your local computer or
Mhm.
hardware associated with your local computer. You know, those you can generally mess with as long as you aren't doing anything that will affect anybody else.
Mhm.
So as long as it stays on your system and your environment, it's generally okay as long as you are still doing it within the ethical framework of you are looking for a bug
Yeah.
with the intention to report it. You know, yeah, it's a little bit of a gray area, but there's there's definitely a desire not to want to discourage people from doing this because it's very important. But there also needs to be rules in place because bad people do bad things.
And
Yeah.
so, in your years of um, participating in the cybersecurity field, how many bug bounty bugs have you actually reported and been rewarded for?
Oh shoot, I have probably a couple dozen bugs that I've
Okay.
reported. I think of like 8 or 9 of them have actually been accepted and paid out.
Okay.
One of my favorites was actually a hardware software bug. Um, if anybody remembers, back a while ago, wireless mouses all had dongles, and if you plugged a dongle into a computer, that it would auto run some software to install. Well, there was a brand that didn't properly protect the auto run software. And while the auto run software was signed itself, it ran unsigned executables to finish the install. And you could change the configuration on the USB dongle to run a different file if you wanted to. So all you had to do was change the configuration file and put a malicious file in there into the installation, and it would install it as a signed application through the signed installer.
So the mouse dongle
Yeah.
could be just be plugged in the USB of any computer, any
And it would
Windows
auto
computer,
install.
and it
Yeah.
will auto install. You
Yep.
will not even have to be logged into the computer.
Well, you would have generally you have to be logged in for Windows
Okay.
to an automatic driver install
Yeah.
because it's basically setting up new hardware. Basically, it's oh, it's a new mouse, so I'm going
Okay.
to go ahead and install this.
Yeah.
And because it has a signed installer and this entire chain, it's like you're just good to go, and it automatically does it in the background. You see that little pop up that pops in the corner, installing new hardware. Yeah, they're just basically
Yeah.
taking advantage of that because they misdid the USB dongle security for the signed installer that allowed you to edit what it was going to install.
Wow. Wow.
So that was one of my favorites. And
Yeah, I can imagine. And how long does it typically take you? Like for this one, for example, how much effort did you have to put into it? And was
um,
the amount of hours versus reward worth it?
so it can totally depend.
Hmm.
Now, certain ones, like that one, uh, actually, I should note that there were multiple brands that suffered from that. I actually cloned this attack from somebody else that did it on a different brand. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I wonder if that also applies here. So, I could say I spent too much time on that, but I still got a nice bug bounty for it.
Oh yeah. So that's actually a good. That's a
But
good trick. That's a good trick.
but yeah, it's like keeping us on top of what other people are finding and being reported as
Yeah.
fixed. Like, did this manufacturer fix that problem too, or are they suffering from it? It's a great question. Other things though, like when I can talk about at least briefly is NVIDIA. If you look, the entire GeForce driver stack is a bunch of node servlets that are running in the background on your
Oh my
computer. So
god.
you have a bunch of node services to support the GeForce experience and all of that. I reported a bunch of interesting things to NVIDIA about way they were using their node servlets and that you could abuse them with you know, minimal elevated access on a local machine. So
Wow.
not a
There's a
full
lot of
exploit stack, just
yeah.
a way to I can use your software to be really bad if I get any access to this machine. So basically, persistence mechanisms, things like that, using somebody else's software just because their software wasn't quite set up right to be secure, and I could go edit it from an um, unauthenticated
Yeah.
account.
So you're pretty much, if you were a developer of malware, you could actually host that malware into their process, their node, and kind of go and detect it pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
No, that's interesting. Krista is mentioning that Atlassian. Oops. What do
But
I do?
yeah,
There we go.
that's
Atlassian is
long been
rewarding
fixed.
10.
So
Say what?
I just want to say that's long been fixed.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, but hey,
at least everything I reported.
but that's the thing. I've noticed that a bunch of ISVs are indeed continuing to use Node as a as the way to actually run their services. I think Asus is doing that. I mean,
Oh yeah,
if I look right now, I think I wouldn't
yeah. The
imagine.
ASUS ROG services are also a node servlet, as
That's
far as
right.
I understand too.
That's right. Let me check. I have a bunch of Node myself, like running right now, and I don't know why, but it's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Steam might be doing the same or similar.
oh,
Um,
Steam. Yeah.
all the Steam helper services, I think those are actually Node. I haven't dug into them to check, but
Mhm.
these are all things that you could technically do if you're like, hey, can I find a bug in this?
Yeah.
This is software you're running on your computer, and you can look at it and go, hey, can I find a bug in this? Now, as I said, um, you know, be mindful, make sure whatever you do stays to your computer. Um, if the vendor specifically says on their website, don't ever touch our stuff, and they're obviously hyper aggressive about it, maybe don't invite trouble on yourself and don't mess with their stuff even on your own computer. But most of them aren't like that. In fact, many of them, even if they don't have a public bug bounty program, if you just say, hey, I saw something, you know, they'll at least thank you. Sometimes they won't pay you, but they'll at least go, hey, thank you for reporting this, and they'll fix it, which is at least the happy end of the deal, right?
Yeah. Teddy has a question. We're going to answer it now. Teddy, don't worry. Can you explain if after completing the cybersecurity course, which I would say boot camp or maybe course, we are required to take an exam, and if we fail the exam, we will be responsible for paying the full course fee. So, um, yes, at the end of each course, there's an exam, 90 question or so exam at the end. So the cybersecurity program is made of 3 courses. Each one of them will have a 90 question exam at the end. You'll probably have 3 takes to pass it. Pass rate is going to be 70%, give or take, we believe. And though that's going to give you access to our certificates. If you fail the exam, you will be responsible for paying the full course fee. I guess what you're saying is paying the full course fee to retake it. I would say if you fail it 3 times, yes, you'll have to actually retake the course and retake the exam. I'm saying that while we haven't really discussed that as a team yet, but that will kind of make sense because if you fail 3 times the exam, we can safely assume that you haven't necessarily acquired all the knowledge and the understanding of the topic, and so you need to retake the course. We'll think about this though. Maybe we'll have a just an exam type of fee. But that's a great question. I guess right now what's certain is every course will lead to an exam, 3 takes to be able to pass it, and 70% pass rate. And I think there was another question from someone else. Oh yeah, there we go. Is 15-week good to get job in cybersecurity? And I'll take that one, Jack, if you don't mind. So we're really covering a wide range of topics. I would say the first 2 courses, so the first 8 weeks, are the fundamentals of cybersecurity, very much drilling into programs, malwares, cryptography, basics of networking, of defending your network. Typically, all the knowledge that you need to know to be an analyst. You're going to have hands-on, but you're really going to be at the very level 100 knowledge of how to really prevent an attack or respond to an attack when that happens. You're not yet technically savvy enough to be able to defend yourself against an attack, but you can plan against it. You can understand it. You can create everything that a cybersecurity analyst will need. The last module is ethical hacking, and that's where we're going to go a little bit deeper into hands-on. What we're going to talk about with Jack, penetration testing, red team, blue team. At the end of the 15 weeks, you'll have learned a ton. Now, what, Jack, I'm sure you'll confirm, just like coding, you need years of experience to really achieve, the greater levels of expertise. Some certification out there won't actually grant you access to even take the certification if you don't prove that you have 2 or 3 years of experience already. So after 15 weeks, you'll know everything you need to know. You'll have a good amount of hands-on experience. You'll be ready to be an analyst, and then you're going to want to give it 2 years. And based on your choice, do you want to go further in the analyst route, or do you want to go further in the technology route? And then after that, you'll figure out where you want to go and what you want to do. Anything else, Jack, that you would like to add?
I mean, I just want to make it clear, like I had mentioned last time, I spend at least an hour every day learning new things, learning new coding, learning something about cybersecurity, picking up, new database technology, something, right now I'm, kind of deep diving AI and how to do transforms and inference and all of that. But, again, AI is kind of like this huge topic right now, so I kind of want to stay on top of it.
That's right. Last question from Teddy, and then we'll resume our conversation. Is it mandatory to take the exam? So technically, you could actually do all 3 modules, never take the exam. You'll have learned everything we teach you, but you will have nothing to show for it. So the exam is very much for you to get access to the certificate and the badge of completion. If you don't pass the exam, you will not be able to showcase that you've earned it. So great for you. You'll still have the knowledge. but not so helpful if you want to advertise that fact and talk about how you've been tested for that knowledge. So it's not technically mandatory. It is mandatory to get the certificate and the badges, not mandatory to actually go through the whole experience and learn everything you want to learn. I hope that makes sense. So let's talk about something new, Jack, that you brought up earlier, the zero trust security model.
Ah, yeah.
That's a very
Zero trust.
interesting topic. Yeah, go for it.
So the zero trust security model is basically adaptation of, yeah, we used to only focus on physical security, local security, because computers used to be an entire room, and unless you could walk into that room, it didn't matter. And even then, you cared about securing your tape data backups and things like that. We didn't have networks. As we've been moving more and more to an interconnected world, however, we've been moving more to a zero trust security model. So what we're doing with the zero trust security module is we're trying to make sure that you only have the access you absolutely need to your system to do the things that you need to do. So the minimal amount of access to any particular user. And this helps keep it so, if a bad guy does get access to your account through, say, phishing or password breach, they only have your limited access. And they still have to elevate their privileges to actually do something other than affect your data or, a very small set of it. So basically it's a way of compartmentalization where you're basically breaking our highly interconnected internet and networks of machines into micro segments that are small contained environments that have what they need to do but can't go out and affect another environment adversely. Oh,
I have an example that comes to mind of that. My very first time being exposed to zero trust security model is actually in the gaming world. And those of you who remember one game in particular, maybe 10 years ago, that was called The Division. The Division, when the Division came out, I think it's a Electronic Arts game, or Ubisoft. I think it was Ubisoft.
Yeah, it's Ubi.
You immediately, I mean, a week later, hackers discovered that it was an online game, that the client was deciding the amount of damage that was done to an NPC or a player, right? And a PvP player. When traditionally what happens is the client sends an information about a hit or maybe even a trajectory or coordinates, and the servers decides what amount of damage that equates to. And so hackers found a way to change the client code, right? Hexadecimal, whatever, and pretty much do a one-shot kill anytime because the client was deciding, the amount of damage. And at the time, I remember, and I think if you Google it, you may find it, there was really that notion that you cannot trust the client, right? So the client should never be in a position to decide what type of changes you want to make in the data. Same is true for websites that communicate with servers, right? Like you don't want a financial transaction to be decided by the client. The information needs to be sent to the server, and the server, only the server, who can trust, that it has access to the right data in the backend, can then make that determination. And so that was for me the interesting bit of never trusting, and especially when you think single page applications that are doing so much on the client, never trust what the client is going to send the server, right? Always reprocess the action on the server, and that you can trust.
Yeah, you have to have a verification or validation model on the server to make sure that what you're getting in is actually valid commands, especially
Yeah.
if you're offloading processing to the client. That is a great example of zero trust. Now, another portion of zero trust is to do continuous monitoring.
Mhm.
So, in a more corporate setting, your security people are definitely monitoring you. They are monitoring your endpoint for suspicious activity. They're monitoring it for going to strange websites, downloading strange things, accessing computers on the network that you have no business accessing, even just looking for strange processes or strange usage habits. Like
Hmm.
suddenly you're using your computer at 2 a.m., but you've never used your computer at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And in fact, you probably should be at home sleeping right now. Again, the continuous monitoring will detect things like this.
Wow.
They'll detect USB drives and other things. Windows actually makes monitoring extraordinarily simple and easy. Windows knows everything about what you do on Windows, and it saves it in like 5 different places. It makes it
Wow.
really hard to get rid of what you've done on Windows.
Yeah.
So, that's a
Especially in
big
the
part of
corporate
this.
world, right? Yeah, I remember one of the fastest growing product at Microsoft was Intune or something like that. I mean, the layer that really enabled corporations to monitor everything that was happening on their servers on their and on their client. Um,
Yep, the remote management interface now for IT is amazing. The granular control that you can have over everything on your Active Directory network.
that's right. And
No,
interestingly enough, it doesn't stop at Windows. Like any
oh
Apple,
no.
Mac, all of that can be
Um,
monitored the same way, right?
Oh yeah, they can be, but out of the box, Windows just has it all built in.
Mhm.
Your Linux cores, so Ubuntu, BSD, there's a little bit in there, like you have a bash history and a profile history, and if you don't have it set up, those don't get wiped every time you log out, things like
Mm,
that. But there's very minimal user activity tracking and logging in a Linux environment that comes out of the box, other
yeah,
than what a process is actually doing. Like, your web server is going to log what requests it gets, things like that, because that's what the platform is interested in. It never was set up for deep user monitoring out of the box. Now, there are lots of tools that you can install, and there are specific flavors of Linux that are fully instrumented out of the box. So I'm not saying that you can't have instrumented Linux. It's just something that you set up.
yeah,
OS X is kind of halfway in between Windows and a Linux box in out of the box level of amount of information it saves about what you do on a daily basis. So it does contain significantly more than your basic Ubuntu installation, but nowhere near as detailed as your off-the-shelf, basic Windows installation. So it's kind of like these three tiers in forensics. And yeah, as you said, all of them, you have tools that you can install on to up
mhm.
this, and you can gather even more information because there's some tools for Windows that, you know, really just kind of blow my mind how much they can gather.
Oh yeah.
But
Do you want to share a little bit?
um maybe we'll save that for another time because forensics is like an entire deep dive. But
Okay.
uh, let's just say that depending on your corporate IT environment, what they know about what you're doing at the office all day could be from your at your computer to they could know exactly what your mouse clicked and when and what you typed and everything else.
Wow.
So
Um, So I want to tell the audience, hey, if you have any question for Jack or myself, feel free to ask them. We've had a good amount already, but very much this is something somewhat interactive. So feel free to chime in. You have also the opportunity, if you want, to join us and ask us questions live, like be on the stage, microphone and webcam on. If you follow that link, I'll bring you on the stage. Show up, show your face, show us that you have a webcam on, and you can have a conversation with us. So just and what you're wearing because they can take pictures. Yes, there's that as well. Um, let's talk about the topic that for me is super fun when I think about cybersecurity, and I know some people enjoy that as well. Um, red team, blue team, penetration testing. What is it about? Actually, tell us what is it about? Having a red team, a blue team. Can you help us understand all that, and maybe share some of one or two of your own experience being on either side of the
So
fence?
So the blue team is your defense team. So they're your analyst, your SOC team, basically your security operations center. So that's where most people are going to start as the most accessible portion of cybersecurity. You're going to be on the defense, which
Mhm,
basically means you're monitoring networks. You're going to be running these IDR, intrusion detection tools, the continuous monitoring of endpoints for your endpoint security, things like that. You're going to be setting up YARA rules to monitor and manage network traffic and other things. Basically detect signs of intrusion on the network. So that's what you're going to do on that side a lot. And there'll be live events where you'll basically be working in a SOC and you'll arrange with a red team to have them do a pen test and see if you can catch them in the act, even.
mm.
So that can be kind of the exciting portion part of the life for a blue team sometimes is you're doing a live engagement with another team. From the red team, it's definitely different. If you're an external red team, you're going to get an engagement, and it might be a secret engagement or not so secret, like we're engaging
Oh,
at 1 p.m. on Friday, or sometime in the next 30 days, you're to engage this network, and we want to see if the blue team even notices.
so when you
Yeah.
say blue team, red team, the blue team is actually employed all year long, typically, to actually do
Yes.
the blue team's job, which is monitoring, right? It's not just a name that we give them because there's something special happening. It's just
No.
their job. They're blue team, right?
That is literally their job. They are blue team. Sometimes they're purple team if they're crossing, between blue and red, because you can get a mixed engagement where you have both sides. But again, that's getting a little bit more advanced here.
Yeah.
Red team depends. They can definitely be full time employed.
Wow.
Sometimes within the company, sometimes with just specific cybersecurity companies where all this company does is red team engagements,
Mhm.
or maybe they do code auditing. Code auditing for basically doing I look at your source code and tell you all the places where I think a hacker might do something bad is a huge business too. So
Yeah.
even if you can only read source code and understand security issues, there's something for you there too.
And that's where also AI helps a ton, right? Doing
Oh
that
yeah.
type of audits. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, a lot Copilot and a lot of AI static analysis stuff. This is actually part of the secure software development life cycle these days. Is we'll do a whole bunch of that. So the static will use AI to look at your source code for known flaws. Dynamic will use AI to look at your source code for also known flaws, but in a build and running environment. So we have a bunch of tools that help with that, but there's still just human experience that comes in. And
And how pervasive is it across companies of which size, I would say, to actually find those red teams and blue teams? Like, it doesn't. It strikes me as something quite expensive to run in house.
I
Like,
mean,
at what point do you, as an entrepreneur, as a yeah, a leader of a company, do you want to? Do you think you should have a red team and blue team
a
approach?
lot of companies need to have a blue team, just
Yeah.
period. You need to have some sort of blue team to handle your security, even if it's a semi-informal blue team, or if it's a light security team that just helps make sure that you stay compliant, keep your patches up to date, and you're following best practices. This depends on, of course, the size of your company. I mean, I've done startups for most of my life. I completely understand the you wear six hats, and that's just what you do. So,
I see. Yeah,
but you
yeah.
have to
So
start from somewhere. And, if you start with a security mindset and build it up, you're at least in the right phase. So, it's kind of like everybody should have some sort of blue team. And as you grow, you should formalize it in a sensible fashion. Now, I don't know any hard and fast rules, $500,000 or whatever. It's like, you
mhm.
really have to ask yourself, how sensitive is what I'm working on? What are my recovery options if an intruder comes in? What personal information am I collecting from my users? You know, if they break into my network, are they just going to steal a bunch of email addresses? That's annoying, but it's not financial data.
Right.
Or is there no personal information in my network? That might also be a case because you might be a small company that's just doing some through processing.
So
So
it's actually a great opportunity for a beginner, for someone who's just starting, to really look for those smaller companies who need cybersecurity expertise but can't afford a full-time blue team person, right? And are probably eager to find someone that can do the quote unquote day job plus build themselves that cybersecurity understanding and planning and defense. And for the person interested in kind of switching careers, that's a great way to get started, right? You continue your day job, but then you build that experience
yeah,
alongside it.
yeah. Now there are some hazards and pitfalls to this.
Hmm.
You might miss things from inexperience. So you're
Yeah,
going to have to work twice as hard if you're going to try this route because it's a very active world. There are literally threats 24/7 these days because half of them are automated.
yeah,
So, it's not something that I would want to say that everybody could just jump into and do that. But, if you are truly motivated, really want to stay on top of things, and you're, with a company that, or can find a company that is, wants to get into security and understands, hey, this is at least better than not having a security
yeah,
and, starting from somewhere,
yeah.
that's okay. But, you don't want to put yourself in the position where, oh, hey, I'm the security expert and oh, I messed up and now everybody's mad at me and they're suing me because I claimed a bunch of things that, I maybe couldn't actually deliver. Don't do that. That, sets a bad precedent for
Mhm.
you. It messes up their company. It makes it harder for everybody else in the security industry as well. So,
Have you
there
have
it,
you have you seen that type of things happening? Like someone who really put himself or herself in that type of situation by overpromising?
I mean, I read Reddit.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's out there. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so it definitely happens.
yeah.
I can
Speaking of
unfortunately
which,
also say I know some people who made a living off of basically security scamming. Going, I'm a security expert,
yeah.
and selling a bunch of bullet point security practices that anybody can Google, and making people feel secure when all they did was the bare minimum. So
So
uh,
speaking of which, Reddit cybersecurity, it's a big, big, big community out there. Almost 700,000 members, top 1%. Tons of stuff here. Obviously, a lot to take with a grain of salt. But I think to your point, um, insightful in terms of people really sharing their experience, expertise, the good, the bad. So something to check out to know, that exists. Can
yep.
you tell us about your own experience? You've been part of those red team, blue team. Well, first, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer being on the blue team or the red team?
I definitely prefer red team or the high level analysis on blue team. I like to do
Mhm.
like malware reverse engineering. So I like to
Oh,
take malware apart and figure
yeah.
out how it's doing the malware so then we can actually do something about it.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
So you're
but
going into wow. So you're
but
using a bunch of
that's
assembly tools and stuff like that, or
yeah, IDA and pulling it back apart to assembler and then taking the assembler and figuring out, okay, what's it actually doing? Which system calls is it making? Where is it linking? So, um, and of course, that's when you have an executable. A lot of
Mhm.
malware is also JavaScript and some HTML and obfuscated just PowerShell script and
Yeah.
all sorts of other things. So you wind up learning and working with many different languages because the way a lot of these work is it's wrapped payload. So you have the initial payload that starts the chain that then gets another payload that does another thing, which then gets another payload and another payload and another payload. And each one's a different technology that you then have to reverse engineer to find the next payload.
Well, yeah. I remember. So I like back in the days, like 15, 20 years ago, I was able to go into the Windows services and pinpoint exactly the service that was not supposed to be there because the name was weird. And nowadays it's impossible. There's so many things that are running on your Windows machine that you
Oh
can
yeah.
know them all. But I do recall that how the malware was installing and then putting itself in the startup or whatever, and then you wouldn't know. But yeah,
Oh, service
interesting.
and yeah, services is definitely a major way of doing persistence. And
Yeah,
yeah, with the hundreds of oddly named Windows services these days, it can be very hard to pick them out.
yeah,
And that's even when they're not being sneaky. Like, I've definitely seen services that are malware services, but they have a name that is almost visually identical to the proper service name, except they're using a Unicode letter that looks like one of the letters. And so it looks like the right name when you're reading it, but it's actually a different letter to the computer. So it's a completely different service.
oh wow, yeah,
They could
yeah,
also do
that
this
doesn't
to
work.
websites too.
Yeah,
So you have to be really careful with web addresses, though most modern browsers will detect these lookalike characters and warn you now.
oh
So
yeah.
that's a good thing.
I didn't think you could really get infected just by going to a website, as long as you never download or execute something. But what you're saying is, no,
Hey,
actually, there are websites that are going to really. I'm guessing they know
oh,
about a security issue with the browser.
yeah, yeah. 0 days in your
Yeah,
browser are a huge industry. Like, there's a reason why Google pays so well. It's
yeah,
because if you find a true 0 day, 0 click exploit and you're a bad guy,
yeah.
you can go to the dark web and you can sell that for a couple $1 million.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, just don't do that, obviously, but that's
Yeah.
why Google, these companies are willing to pay so well for these bugs, is because they're literally against the dark web, and their big upsell is you're not a bad guy, you're doing the right thing. So here, let us give you some money.
Yeah, because a 0 day on Chrome could mean potentially infecting billions of people at once.
Yeah. Well, so think if you got a 0 day, 0 click that you can get past Google's own advertiser screening bot,
Yeah,
and you basically put a 0 day exploit into an ad over Google
that's
that
right.
Google then distributes to everybody using Chrome. Every time that ad gets displayed in somebody's web browser,
Wow.
they get infected. Also, everybody should still use ad blocker.
Yeah. No matter what YouTube says.
Yes.
Um, this is so we're 2 minutes away from the end. I mean, you and I, we talked about what we wanted to talk about. What do you want to bring up in those last 2 minutes? And I know you have a cliffhanger ready for us, but what else should we talk about?
I mean, there are so many topics. So, big one that we definitely should be mindful of, though, is incident response. I know we teased
Mhm.
about it a little bit earlier, but being ready to respond to an incident is
Yeah,
going to be what makes the difference between, okay, this was annoying, it cost a couple days worth of productivity, to, oh my company is now bankrupt and I'm selling
yeah.
everything, and maybe the police are knocking on my door because there's some civil suits and maybe even some criminal suits because I was being totally negligent in my data protection. So incident response is important.
There's an example. Wasn't it like in the last 3-4 weeks, a company I think in Europe had to declare bankruptcy because of an attack? Like they could not
um
survive the attack. Does that recall? Do you recall?
I've heard of such things. I don't know the one you're talking about off the top of my head,
It
but
wasn't
it
very
does
well
happen.
known, but yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, we last week we talked about MGM Grand, and how obviously they were not prepared for what happened to them, and how really the whole thing turned into a 100 million loss, having to go back to manual processing of guests arriving at their hotels. Um, so let's talk about that incident response. And I don't know how much you've been able to look into that, but based on what you know about it, what went wrong, like in terms of how they responded to the incident?
Oh, Uh, I mean, obviously, not much has been made public about this.
Mhm.
It's stuff they keep close to the chest. So, we can definitely take a look at a few factors externally, though. Basically, they lost everything. So
Yeah.
either they had incident response and thought it was good incident response, and it completely failed, or they didn't have any incident response and it completely failed, or succeeded by not having it.
Yeah.
You know, it, but if they had an incident response and it completely failed, it was most likely because they weren't properly implementing a zero trust model, or they
Mhm.
may have had some sort of serious security flaw or configuration flaw in one of their root, ADO nodes, or AD nodes, where basically once they got that machine, they owned everything and then could push malicious updates to the entire network. And a bad configuration can do that. So
Mhm.
if you know, now, they should have definitely had, some sort of detection and other, system set up that maybe would have prevented that or isolated that before it got out of hand. And then again, that's part of your incident response is, okay, we've detected our, root AD has been compromised. We're going to segregate that from the rest of our network, and we're going to use our fallback until. And as soon as we turn on our fallback, we're also going to roll all our passwords for all of our back end services at the same time, just in case, because there's a whole bunch of ways that you can abuse AD tickets once you have a good foothold in an AD environment. Golden ticket and silver ticket abuse is a major thing, and then you can dump hash credentials for all the username and passwords, and then you can use high-end graphics cards to basically reverse the hashes on those, basically doing a brute force attack,
Yeah.
going, okay, does this compute into this hash? Yes. Oh, you found the password. And so they have rainbow tables of that, and for things that aren't in a rainbow table, they could still do a whole bunch of processing to reverse them. So there's a
Wow.
lot of bad things they can
Yeah.
do once they get into the AD, and so you have to be prepared to immediately and correctly response to a breach in AD, or you're going to lose a lot of systems.
Wow. There's so much more that we could talk about, Jack. And I think you and I talked about maybe actually doing it another time, maybe a third time. Um, I really want to thank you for sharing all of that with the audience. I know a lot of people are interested. Before we go, I want to plug what's going to happen next week. Totally different topic next week, but also very exciting. We're going to talk about how our graduates are going to be able to work with OpenAI, not directly, kind of indirectly, and actually participate in the training of the next model, and how they're going to be paid for that. So we're going to have a special guest next week. Again, it's going to be super exciting how graduates can contribute to training the next model and be paid pretty handsomely for it, I must say. So, looking forward to it. Jack, again, real pleasure to have you. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for being such an incredible instructor with us as well. And yeah, we'll talk again. Take care,
It's
everyone.
been great. Thanks, y'all.
See ya, and go red team. See ya.